Hi, everybody. This is Mike Leahy. Thanks for joining us today. Our topic today is taking a more accurate and a less stressful physical inventory. And we can all shake hands over the phone. This is my photo in the upper right. Terry Lanham and Ann Hayner are on the line. Terry's photo, he's in the bottom in the light blue shirt or the darker blue shirt. Ann's not in that picture. But for those of you who aren't familiar with us, we've been in business for a long time. We have over 28 years of Macola expertise. We specialize in manufacturing and distribution. And what we're going to talk about today is physical inventory and how to make that go better. One of the difficulties with a physical inventory is that you only do it once a year, maybe twice a year. And it's hard to remember the things that went right and wrong in the settings. And so we have this checklist, and we're now sharing this checklist. We started this checklist actually over 25 years ago, and we've been refining it year after year after year. In the checklist, and for those of you who are listening to this the recording and you don't have the checklist, you can call us up and we will send you a copy of the checklist. But what you'll notice in the checklist is that there are some sections that are bolded, which means that's like the first level of things that can go wrong. The second level will be where it's bolded and all uppercase. That's the second level of things that can go wrong or things that you should be paying attention to. And then if it's bolded and all uppercase and it's highlighted in yellow, that means several people have gone before you and made mistakes in that area, and that's our warning for you to read that and double read and triple read that so that you won't make that mistake. I'm going to emphasize multiple times today that there's a need. You have to practice this. Since this is something you're only doing once a year or twice a year at best, you have to make a duplicate copy of your main database, create a test database, and run this whole thing through, run all the steps, all the reports through, even key in some quantities counted, and do that, and then follow it all the way to the ledger to make sure that you're getting the right results. Otherwise, what can happen is you think you did something and you're not quite sure, and it's in the heat of the moment, there's nothing you can do. You can't easily delete a batch and start over again. So that's what we're going to talk about. Okay, so and along the way, we're going to look at some of the Macola screens, and along the way, we're going to look at some of the Pulse dashboard screens. For those of you who are using Pulse dashboard, if you do not have the physical inventory screens that we will be showing, we'll be happy to email those to you, and it's a simple 2 or 3 minutes to import them. For those of you who are not using dashboard or your company's not using it, this will sort of whet your appetite in terms of things that will make this go more accurate. So we're starting off with a chart here. I'm not going to read this. For those of you who have this in front of you, you can read this at your convenience, but we try to have an overview chart of what's happening here. Basically, you're creating a batch, you're freezing the inventory. For those who are new to Macola, the word freezing inventory has nothing to do with freezing or temperature. It simply means that it's making a copy, just a copy of your on-hand quantities and your costs, and it is putting it into a special place to remember. That's all it is. Nothing to do with freezing. It does not prevent you from continuing to process, nothing like that. Okay. Oh, here we are. Our first reminder is to practice, practice, practice. Okay. So we'll go through this real fast, but there's some sections that we'll slow down. You have to freeze the inventory, and those of you who you need to freeze the inventory. Some people will say, well, Macola doesn't use this and this and that, but you have to have, our recommendation, it takes 2 minutes. Just go ahead and run the freeze here. When you create your batch, it also creates another copy of the freeze, but that is not accessible. So just follow this step here. Okay, now we're into the most difficult part of the entire inventory, and it's this program called run the physical, or the program called Physical Inventory Count. And I'll go down and we'll show the screen. Oh, just a note here, I've tried to include both Macola progression screens and Macola ES screens, and Macola 10 is the same as ES. So if you look at this progression screen, there's a lot going on here, all kinds of checkboxes, all kinds of things to put in the physical screen for ES. It's a little bit streamlined, but there's really just, the options are all there the same. So it is really easy to not check or check. So one of the things that I suggested is, one of the tips I suggested is, before you press enter, make a screenshot so that you can know exactly what your screen looked like. If you run into problems later, this is part of being a learning curve. Okay, so let's take a look at this. We have a batch ID, that's real easy. We have a location, that's easy. Oops, starting tag number. A lot of times I'll have somebody say they use the same tag numbers year after year after year. So they order a set of tags from somebody, spend a few $100s with those, and then they start the physical inventory batch, and they can't get to that tag number because it was used last year. So it is technically possible to reuse the same tag every year, but in order to do that, you have to destroy and delete all of your tag history files, which means you now have robbed yourself of any kind of analysis, and you can't. Go with the flow. Don't order pre-numbered tags unless you know what the starting number is. Number of extra tags. Okay, if your company is storing product in multiple locations in the warehouse, it's going to be necessary to be able to have a count for the main location and a tag, a separate tag for each of the other locations. So it is better to have many more tags than not have enough. If you run out of tags, what you'll be faced with is doubling up counts on one tag. In other words, you'll have 10 from one location, 10 from another location, and you'll put in 20, and then you won't know where the real variances were. So there's no penalty for having a lot of extra tags. Okay, this one right here. People in dashboard, we pinpoint in the inventory exceptions all the items that have a negative on hand. So what people do is they say, well, I'm going to exclude my negative on hands, and I'm going to exclude my zero on hands, and that is a very, very fatal mistake. What it means is any item that happens to be a zero today, it's not going to create a tag, and that's not realistic. So do not exclude tags, do not exclude negative quantities. Another tip on negative quantities is, if you leave let's say it has a negative 100 in there today, and you count 50. So what Macola does is it takes the frozen quantity, which is in this case minus 100, and adds 50 to it. So what do you end up with? You end up with a minus 50, and then the variance is screwed up. So you have to eliminate, even if it's creating an adjustment to force each one of them to zero. You cannot have a decent count with negative on-hand quantities. Okay. Do you want to use frozen quantities in your calculation? Here's another very fatal mistake. You must activate this box. You'll say, well, I don't need that because I'm doing it a certain way. You have to have this box activated, or the screens will be blank and you won't, you just need to. Okay, this is an area that's very confusing. Do I want to create my physical count with or without item numbers? And let's just go over that for a minute. We're going to dwell on this for a minute, but many of the other areas we're just going to gloss over. Okay, so there's two ways this is going to happen. One is Macola is going to create a tag, a number. You may not actually print the tag, but it's going to create a number. So let's say it's tag 100. So you have the option here. Do you want tag 100 to have a part number associated with it or not? Okay, so let's say that you do have a part number associated with it. Well, that means all you need to do is key in the quantity counted. Real simple. If you don't assign a tag number to the part, what you're going to be faced with then is keying in or scanning. You'd be forced to key in the part number and the quantity. So therefore, you have now two areas of potentially making mistakes. So read this over several times. Call us if you have questions, but this is very, very important. This is the area that is the most troublesome. You do want to exclude obsolete items. If you have made an item obsolete, that means it is not in the ledger anymore, and you don't want to be counting it, and you don't want to be putting in variances and so on. Okay, I'm suggesting again, make a screenshot before you click OK, so that when you call us or you call whoever you work with or you call Macola, and they'll say, well, did you check this box? And you'll say yes, and they'll say, oh, I don't think you did, because the reaction you're getting, the results you're getting mean that you didn't check this box or you didn't check this box. So I think that's going to be real important. Okay, so some people actually print the tags. Some people have count worksheets. There's all kinds of variety of ways. We won't go into that right now. Okay, so this is the way that the system wants to work, is that let's say that your frozen quantity is 100 and you count 95. So what that means, it's going to make an adjustment for 5. So it's going to say, okay, we thought we had 100, we counted 95, which means we made an adjustment for 5. So that means that you'll see an adjustment transaction in there for 5, and you'll be able to learn, okay, we had 5 out of 100, we had a 5% error rate for that. If you don't do it this way, and because there's a way to just say, okay, well, whatever I count, that's what my quantity is going to be changed to. You'll have no history, you'll have no learning, there's no learning curve as to what is happening. So that's something to be thinking about. Okay, once you count, all the activities can resume. You do not need to hold things up until you post. Some people post 4 or 5 days or a week later. Okay, if you're using the WISA software, things will go much, much faster and a bit more accurate, at least in what the part numbers are. So let's go on here. And these are the screens for manually keying in tag counts. If you are using WISA for scanning, you won't have this. It'll go in there automatically. But the benefit of having a part number pre-assigned to a tag is that you put in the batch number, you put in the tag number, let's say it's tag number 40, and immediately it knows the item number. You do not have to key the item number in. And then immediately it moves you down here to the count. You put in, say, 10, press enter. It takes you then to up here. You basically go to the next one, and it's enter, and it's key in the quantity, enter, tab, key in the quantity, enter, tab, and it goes extremely fast if you assign part numbers to tags. If you don't, then you're going to have to manually key in the tag number, manually key in the item number, manually key in the quantity count. It'll be a lot more tedious and of course more prone to error. Okay. A lot of times when the dust has settled, and we're going to go and take a look at some reports in a minute, so we're not just focusing on this checklist. Reconciling the counts. My experience tells me that you can conceivably start your recounting within an hour of starting your counting. And some people will say, well, gosh, we can't do that. We have to wait until 4:30 in the afternoon when everyone's left to start our recounting, when the trail is cold, when nobody is there to ask, Bill, where'd these parts go? Or how did you possibly get 1,000 when we only show 100? So that the recounting can start immediately. And we're going to show you a report that we have that will pinpoint areas. In other words, if the frozen quantity is 1,000 and the count quantity is 100, there's no reason to wait until 4:30 to figure out that they probably miskeyed it. In other words, it was supposed to be 1,000, they only keyed in 100. They probably just left it off. There's a button called Count Extra Tags, which is right here. If you're getting a question about or an error message that says, I can't proceed because you have to count the extra tags, that means you just have to click on here. And basically what it does is it's zeroing out the extra tags, because a lot of them you're not going to use. Okay. This is where things become even more tedious. It's now like a day or so later. maybe it's late in the evening, and you have you print the PrePost Register. Okay, what that means is that it's telling you where your problems are. It's telling you, for example, that you typed in a lot number or a location or a bin number that didn't exist, and it allows you to fix things. It also tells you immediately what your variance is going to be, but we have a dashboard screen that does that. But the idea is that you have to print the PrePost register, and then later you're going to print the final register. Now, when the final register is printed, this is another area of a problem. This frozen date ends up being the posting date. So I'll give you an example. Let's say that you froze the inventory on the 26th of December, and then when you post this, you use January 2nd as your posting date. Well, what that means is that it's not going to recognize any of the frozen quantities, and your physical inventory will be destroyed. So when you're creating the batch, one of the benefits of printing a screen print of it is you know exactly what your batch date was, and that's the date that you want to use for the GL distribution and the posting date. In other words, deep into January and February, you can still use December dates. And here's a little box showing you that you can select just the PrePost. Okay. Let's go through some things that are going to potentially go wrong. Let's say you run out of extra tags. You can't do anything about that. You find part numbers in the warehouse, parts in the warehouse that are not in the item master. You can't recover from that. If you forget to post the tags, you can't recover from that. The tags will stay there for an entire year until you do this again next year. So again, I think we've gone through enough of the checklist that it speaks for itself. We have used this with our customers for a good 25 years. I think it may even been before that when we worked with MCBA, which is the mother software of Macola. I think we started that checklist at that time. So let's go over to dashboard and start talking about reports, because we've tried to come up with reports in dashboard that make things a little bit easier. So let's go into dashboard for a second. Well, maybe before we do that, we're in the Macola ES screen. It might be good to drag over and create shortcuts over here. So what I did on mine was I went to the inventory menu and I dragged this physical count over. It already was there. And I dragged over the enter tag counts and the post tag counts. For those of you who may be new to the Macola ES screen and navigating, I have to go into System in order to do my freezing of the inventory. I have to go in here. Here's freeze the inventory. And then when I want to print my reports, I have to go back to here. I go to Reports. I click on here. I go to where are they? They go to account, inventory count, sorry. And here are my different reports, and many of these we've replicated in dashboard, but this is where all the reports are stored. So let's take a quick look in dashboard and let's take a look at what we've done. The first one is we have a frozen stock status report. There's really no need to print out the Macola stock status report. You won't be able to deal with it. It's hard to read. You can't export it to Excel. So in this case here, I have the CIN location, and I have, this is my freeze date in my test database of August 31st. So this then tells me the on-hand quantity. It tells me the my freeze date, my freeze quantity, and so on, my freeze extended cost. Now I've added some fields to this. Remember, these fields in this cream color are fields that do not exist in Macola, and we have those available to you. So when you're analyzing things, if you had 100 months of inventory on hand and you only counted 10, this is an indication of approximately how much you should be counting. If somebody says, well, we haven't used this part in years, this is allowing you to see the average monthly usage over the past 3, 6, and 12 months. Or conceivably, this is the date of last usage. So if somebody says, well, the reason we didn't count any was we don't use this item anymore, and you go over here and you see it was used last month, that tells you that they didn't count it right. So this is information, date of last usage. That probably is good enough. For date of last inventory activity would probably be good enough. Again, if you purchased it just a month ago and they can't find any, it's telling you that something is wrong. So this is the frozen stock status report. But I'm going to go into this is part of our new menuing system. Remember before we just have a report. When you click on a tab, now you're seeing a menu and there's submenus under that. So I'm going to show you some of what we have done here. Okay, it's refreshing this up here. So let's take a look at this prior year inventory variances. And what is that for? And my philosophy is that every single company has, every time they take an inventory, they have 10 or 20 parts that year after year after year cause problems. The workers hide them, they're put off in the corner, they're stored in weird locations, they're stored in the wrong location, and every year they seem to be problems. So what this allows you to do is to go in here to the setup. Unfortunately, this test database doesn't have the data in it. And I can say, I want to look over the past 3 years, and I want to look at all items that have given me more than a 95% variance. That'll narrow the list down considerably. And then that will be the list to pre-count, to double count, to triple count, because those are the items that have given you either the largest quantity variance or the largest dollar variance year after year. So this is a cool report. This was my invention of this. This is for those of you who are assigning item numbers to tags, and we have a similar one for those where you have item numbers not assigned to tags. This is a real-time variance analysis report. So in other words, if you're scanning manually and keying them in manually, whether you're using YSYS or not, and you can sort this down by your tag variance quantity. You can sort this positive and negative. So this is negative, this is positive. You can look for variance quantities that are of interest, or maybe some people are just interested in the variances where they're big dollars. In other words, if we're counting fasteners and they only cost a penny each, we may not be too concerned about it. But if we're counting circuit boards that cost 100 each, this is then where we have. So this is where you start focusing on, and you want to export this to Excel, take it on the floor to the recount team. So this is, so again, what we have here, I should also mention, if you're using bins, this supports bins. This tells you whether it's an extra tag flag or not, and so on. So this is your real-time variance analysis report. This also then, if you go to the bottom here and you right-click and you say sum, this will be, oh my gosh, we're faced with a $20 million inventory variance. By the time you finish your inventory, it's not going to be this, but this is the early signal or early warning signal that of what that inventory variance will be, what that adjustment will be. So if your top management is involved, they typically are hovering because they want to see what is this variance. They want to know ahead of time what this variance is going to be, so that when the president or the owner wants to know that, they can say, oh, things are going well. But if this is a big number, then the idea is just to go through either positive or negative and start sorting this down and figuring out what items are causing these huge variances. And this is where you go. So for those of you who may not be or may be new to dashboard, I simply double click up here. I'm on this blue bar. That's how long it took to refresh. Or I can right click and say refresh, or I can go to this refresh button over here. So in other words, I don't have to refresh all of dashboard to refresh this. So you can see it just takes, this is a real database with 5,000 or 6,000 parts. So it goes very, very quickly. So again, this is our real-time variance analysis report. This one is similar. This is physical inventory for items not counted. Okay, so let's talk about this for a second. Okay, this one is a little bit cooler because it allows you to see for each tag. Let's say that this item might have had 5 or 6 tags. It allows you to drill down and see the tag, each tag, what location it came out of, or maybe even what bin number, and then so if you had a variance, a big variance, and there were 5 or 6 tags, you'd be able to see exactly where that where that came from. And for those of you who aren't familiar, this is a dashboard screen where we link. This is what's called the Advanced Screen Designer. We're linking 2 screens together, and the idea is that I'm clicking on an item up here, and down below I'm showing the tag number and the tag information that supports that. So this is another report that we have. This is a little fancy because it shows you difference dollars and so on. Okay, but this next report is really important, and this is what I get a lot of phone calls from people who, after the dust is settled, it's the next day, it's a week later, and it's like, oh my gosh, we forgot this. We forgot to count this part. It just fell off the radar. We had 5,000 parts. We couldn't. How in the world were we going to figure out that we didn't count these 10 parts? Of course, they're always the critical parts. In Macola, there's a really cool report that shows you tags, items not counted, but that's after you post it. And of course, that's not going to do any good. So we came up with this report to show you, and it's, if there's a 1 in this column here, it got counted. If there's not, it means it didn't get counted. So this allows you to, it's so important to make sure that all the items have been counted. Otherwise, what it's going to do is it's going to assume that if there were 100 frozen and none counted, then it's going to set it to 0, which means you'll be doing a lot of quantity adjustments for those items. So this report may be very helpful. This is physical inventory variances and items not counted. It kind of looks like we've maybe duplicated some of these reports, and I'm sure that's correct, but if we give you all 3 of these and you can pick and choose. But again, you're using this in your practice. You're using this in your checklist ahead of time, so you can figure out which report you like, which report you want to use, and which report is helpful to you. Okay, I think that has pretty much covered what I wanted to cover. Anne, are there any questions from the audience or things that I have forgotten to mention that need to be addressed?
Do you want me to unmute folks, Mike, or
yes,
would you like to?
Listen, okay. Yep. Maybe this is a time for people to ask questions. And one thing I know Anne always brings this up as a question. Does our software work? Does our checklist work with all versions of Macola? And yes, the answer is yes. All of our software works with every version of Macola that possibly could still be running, except btrieve. So any SQL version, probably for the past 15 years, we're supporting that all the way up to the most recent version, most current version of Macola 10. Okay, we had some noise in the background.
Yep,
okay.
I just muted someone there. Mike, what kind of suggestions do you have for people where it literally takes weeks to count because of the physical environment that they're in?
Well, I would probably say if that's a factor, that means that to count everything in one day is overwhelming. And I would, Anne was bringing this up at the beginning, that the alternative to doing this once a year and having a steep learning curve, because it's impossible to remember from one year to the next, would be to go do cycle counting. And cycle counting would allow you to count maybe everything that's feasible to be able to count in an 8-hour shift, get it keyed in, and then make the adjustments. Another way would be to count all of your outside locations ahead of time. I've seen situations where maybe you have outside warehouses that you control, or 3PL controls, and you're asking for counts from them, so you could create a batch for those ahead of time, get those done a week ahead of time. But if you truly have that much of an overwhelming count problem and you can't shut the plant down for 3 or 4 days, then I think that you probably should look into cycle counting. And I should mention, behind the scenes, under the hood, the cycle counting program and the physical inventory program are identical. The screen has more flexibility for cycle counting, but it is the underlying program is identical.
Okay, that's good advice. I don't have any written questions, so folks, if you have questions, now would be a good time to speak up. We've got almost everybody unmuted. If you need to be unmuted.
Did I forget to mention, this is a joke, did I forget to mention practicing? Let's go up to the top here and go over the prerequisites, or the getting prepared stuff here. Let's look at what's here. Oh, it says refresh your test database and practice and practice and practice. And I say this because somebody used our checklist recently. They got all done with it and they said, well, the checklist didn't work. And I said, well, what did you key? Well, I keyed it in the way it showed on here. And I knew that that wasn't the case because we've been using this checklist for 25 years. And there was a checkbox down here. Use this checkbox wasn't checked. Use frozen quantities and calculations was not checked. Okay.
Well, everybody either has this totally under control or they're just digesting.
I have a question.
That's Christian Bellman. How are you?
Oh, I'm just peachy. How are you?
It's great to hear your voice.
You didn't read his email from this morning. He's really not okay, but that's another subject.
Okay.
No, and that's actually what I'm asking about. And if you want to tell me sidebar, that's fine.
No, go ahead right now.
So I guess my question is, we've got lot control as the first step for WISIS. We had to pause on the WISIS project. So our lot numbering system kind of went by the wayside. What is in the system now is essentially fake information and is causing all kinds of problems for us. We're about to do physical inventory. How are my tag entries going to work with what essentially amounts to bogus lot numbers in the system?
Which is actually a larger topic too to talk about for just a minute, Mike, which is lot numbers and serial numbers.
Yeah.
So thanks, Chris. That's good. That's good.
Well, Chris, Donna Lansing, this is the reverse of something that Donna Lansing does. And if they're totally wrong, what I would do would be to create a new lot number. We'll call it 999, and use that lot number for all lot numbers for the entire inventory. We probably ought to talk about this some more. And then that way, since they're no good right now, at least they all be together under one bad lot number. And then, or unless, are you wanting to correct these and make them the real lot number during the inventory? If so,
no.
Then you just need to, you don't, okay.
Honestly, what I'd like to do is stop using lot control for now. But now that I have activity on it, I'm not sure if that's even possible.
Oh no, we can do that. We'll just turn off the lot checkbox along. Yeah, we can do that. I won't be able to pinpoint exactly. We'll need to test that. But yes, that, in other words, we're just going to unlot everything as if it never had been lotted, and then we'll destroy, along the way, we'll destroy the lot number file and the lot number transaction file, and Macola will never know that there was any lot activity, and you can take it, you take your counting the right way. But I was busy today and I didn't get your, I'm glad you're bringing that up right now, Chris, so that's feasible.
Awesome, that's good news.
Okay.
Is there anybody on the call that needs to discuss lot and serial numbers? Because they do take some special handling in a physical. If not, we won't bother with it.
Now, if there aren't any questions, we are going to record this, and a lot of people maybe are relying on the fact that they'll be able to review the recording and pick up tips from there, or kind of watch the whole thing in slow motion. But yeah, feel free to call us to help you. Don't wait till the 26th of December, though. Try to call us ahead of time. But the checklist is, you know, I kind of poke fun of my own checklist, but the checklist is designed to have brought up every problem that anyone has had who has gone before you, and try to anticipate those and make those bold and yellow and so on. So if you printed the checklist out in black and white, go back and print it out in color, and it'll be a lot more effective to be able to review. And for those of you who are using Dashboard and haven't seen these screens here, I think everyone who's on the call will get, I'll just go ahead and email you these reports, and then it's real easy to import them. We have a little cheat sheet on how to import, and then you'll have those and be able to see if they'll work for you. Okay, if not, we appreciate everybody coming out the afternoon before Thanksgiving, and appreciate your support. For those of you who are software customers of ours, appreciate that, or consulting customers, we appreciate that very much. And I think as a country, we have a lot to be thankful for. Sometimes, anybody want to say something? Oh, I thought somebody was starting. So, okay, thank you very much. Have a good holiday. And for those of you who had specific questions, Chris will get back and discuss those. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.